Hi, everyone. Welcome to Onstage with Dorian, where we meet people who bring you live performance in Vermont and New Hampshire. Actors, singers, dancers, puppeteers, directors, designers, and more. I'm Dorian Chanois. Let's get started. My guest today is Sarah Manning, a dancer, actress, and fitness coach active in both New Hampshire and Vermont. Her journey began in New York, but not because she was trying to build a career on Broadway, and she's going to tell us all about that. So welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Dorian.
Okay, so let's get to know you a little better.
All right.
Let's see. Well, when and how did theater first become a part of your life?
Well, I was born into theater. Both my parents, my dad actually came from Iowa on an egg truck because he always wanted to be an actor. And he was born and raised in Iowa on a farm, and so came over on an egg truck and really wanted to be an actor, but happened to land an opportunity to work with Joe Papp with Shakespeare in the Park. And then he met Jerome Robbins, who decided he should be a stage manager, and that's how his journey began. And my mom was at the time a dancer slash actress on Broadway who grew up in the Bronx, and said she saw my dad and asked if he was straight and single, and says he never knew what hit him. So I grew up with a dad who was a stage manager, so you never knew when he would have a job or not. So when they were deciding to have children, my mother left working on stage to work backstage and do subscriptions for actually the Met, and then eventually for the State Theater, and now she's officially retired.
Okay, so the Met is the Metropolitan Opera, not the Art Museum.
No, you're exactly right. The Metropolitan Opera House.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said your dad was a stage manager. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? What did he do?
So he organized everything backstage, from the actors to what the director needed, to making sure people were hitting their cues, to making the lighting cues, the sound cues. They basically run everything behind the scenes. And they're also involved in the beginning process of where the director wants everything. So they are involved in every little process to make sure it runs smoothly from beginning to end, so that you see what the director wanted to see.
When you were a child or a teen, did you take theater classes, dance classes, anything of that sort?
Yes. So when I was growing up, I first started in ballet, which I think was what every little girl started with, right? And my mother, being a dancer, wanted me initially in ballet. And at the time, I was going to a local parochial school because we lived not in the greatest neighborhood of New York City, but it's what my parents could afford. And so it was a great little community, but I wasn't necessarily going to the private school, but because we couldn't afford that, or the public school. So we had this cute little parochial school called St. Hilda's in St. Hugh's, and they had someone come in to teach ballet. Well, I'm flat-footed, so back, when I was growing up, it wasn't a great thing to be flat-footed and try and do ballet. And the instructors, as well as several of the nuns, told my mother it may not have been my forte to do ballet, but that's how I started dancing. And then I actually took more of a role in singing and acting later, because for my high school, I actually went to LaGuardia Music and Art Performing Arts, and was actually a voice major.
Is that the one that's in the movie Fame?
It is. So the newer school is where they brought them all together, but it originally was Music and Art Performing Arts, which is exactly where Fame was shot for the TV show. And we didn't necessarily dance in the halls, but there were definitely singing in the halls, and if the sub was there, there may have been dancing in the classrooms. But it was definitely a great experience to be able to do that, coming from a theater background.
So you went to a performing arts high school.
Mm-hmm.
What were your college plans?
So growing up with two parents, especially one in the business, and struggling to find a job, you also were around a lot of their friends. So it was made clear to me that I didn't want to go into theater because it was just really hard. So my goal was to be a marine biologist. I was going to train whales and seals. That was like my dream. And when I got to school, I was taking science, which I went to Bates College in Maine. And so I started my marine biology career, or my degree, and quickly learned that science was really hard. And I was, and I could struggle at it and still work towards it, but I really missed theater. And so I decided to have a double major in marine biology and theater. And thankfully, at a private school like Bates, you can have that availability. But it was tough. So instead of being an acting major, I was a directing major because I could coordinate my classes to make my labs work with being a director rather than being an actor in the main stage.
So college was when you first came to New England, is that right?
Yes. So, and it's actually where I met my husband.
Oh.
Yes. So it's the first time I came to New England because I was ready to leave the city for a little while. I had grown up there, and there was a lot of stresses and different things going on that I was ready to just break away for a little while. And that's when I went to Bates College. And they had a great program in Marine, a lot of one-on-one, because it's a nice, beautiful, small New England college, right? To give me lots of opportunities.
How did you arrive? So you work in both Vermont and New Hampshire, but you live in New Hampshire.
Yes.
How did you come to live in New Hampshire?
So we came to live in New Hampshire after my husband, who is originally getting his postdoc in Massachusetts, got a job opportunity at Chroma here in Vermont. It's employee owned, and it allowed him a little bit more flexibility to be a dad, because at that time we came over, my daughter was 2 when we were about to have our second child, about a few months after we moved here. And it allowed him to do the science, because he's an application science at Chroma, so could work with people to see what tools they needed to run an experiment, but also have the hours to allow him to be a soccer coach, be home at the end of the day, which as a postdoc, when you're working with, a strict timeline to get your results from your lab done, didn't allow for that flexibility.
So explain just quickly what a postdoc is.
Okay. So my husband got his PhD in neuroscience and anatomy from UVM, and he was looking for a lab to start doing research with, to potentially get on to be a lab assistant and be in publications for if he should decide to go on to a professorship or move on to different things. So that's what.
So when he was getting his PhD in Burlington, were you also coming up to Vermont and getting a taste of this part of the world then?
Yeah, so we lived in Burlington right after we lived in Massachusetts for a little while, where I did a little dabbling in marine biology. I was actually a volunteer at the New England Aquarium full-time and got to really dive in, even with the penguins and the penguin tray. That was my sort of taste into marine biology. But what I knew is I needed more vet tech background and also more interaction with animals. So when my husband got this opportunity to come up to Burlington, I took it and actually worked at a humane society to get more vet tech experience, and did some different diving in Lake Champlain, which was very different than doing it in other places I had done before.
I want to take a look at some photos of you in action as an actor, and then ask you some questions about your, I don't know, preferences in theater. Okay. So could we have the first picture? Okay, tell us about this.
This is one of my first roles. So part of what I did is I also was raised Christian and Catholic at a little church called the Church of Notre Dame. And they would put on little plays. And my first ever role was as the Virgin Mary in this little production. And I think it was with Bernadette. I think the other character next to me was playing Bernadette at the time. And it was really clear that I loved to be on stage. I think my parents would talk about how I was definitely a ham and I enjoyed every second of it.
How old were you in this? You were pretty young.
I think I was like 9.
So did you even know what a virgin was? You don't have to answer that.
Probably not at the time. Yeah.
Okay. Next picture. Okay. I know which one you are. What is this play? What are you doing?
So this is one of my more recent comebacks to theater. This is Grumpy Old Men. I was Agent Snyder, Aunt Sandra Snyder, and I was the villain. And I am there chastising my fellow actor, Kevin, who I got to meet because they brought in actors who could sing, because it was a musical, and it's one of the very few musicals they do with the Walpole Players, which is a community theater based in Walpole, New Hampshire, and most of their productions are done at the Walpole Town Hall. So this one was done right at the Walpole Town Hall. I had worked with the director prior, but not the music director. So the director was Barbara Casper, who used to own Costume Ladies back when it was in Walpole.
What is Costume Ladies? So
Costume Ladies was a store that sold costumes. We could make handmade ones, or we had things that you could buy like teeth for fangs or wigs. So you could buy little accessories, or if you needed something custom made, we would rent and had costumes for rent and to buy. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And did you get caught, villain?
I did. I eventually catch Kevin because he needs to pay his backlog of insurance, but his dad thankfully sweetens me up and he doesn't have to pay them and ends up okay. But it was my first time back. I have to say it's my absolute favorite role. When you have entrance music, there is nothing like it, but it definitely brought me back to how much I enjoy doing musical theater and being not only an actor but singing, and it just was one of my favorite experiences, from the cast to the direction to the performance.
And this was your first time with the Walpole Players, is that right?
No, it was my first time back. I had been with them prior 13 years ago, and then I was raising my kids, so I took a little break. Raising kids, sports, doing my job at Westminster Fit by Boot Camp. I just didn't have the time to do theater, and then obviously COVID is COVID. So we all got pulled a little bit away, and my daughter was just about to go to college, and I knew I was going to be a bit of an empty nester, and Barbara caught me just at that right moment, and the rest is history.
All right, let's see some more history. Next picture, please.
Oh, this is history. So this was one of my first roles when I came to New Hampshire. I knew I wanted to get back into community theater, and this is by River Theater. This is the Crucible. And River Theater was I have to tell you, I had never ever auditioned for a show and gotten a part. And
how did you get parts?
So I usually didn't. I would work backstage a lot. And I always wanted to be on stage. And River Theater was doing little dinner mysteries. And I went out to audition, and actually the person who's hailing here, Mike Wright, his part of dinner theater, and he gave me my first role. And it was with River Theater, which is the community theater out of Charlestown, New Hampshire. And they did their dinner theater out of their town hall, which was really small. So the Crucible was done by Heidi Fagan, another member of River Theater, who had this idea to take the Crucible, which is a really serious play, and bring it to Fort Number 4. So you not only saw it, but you felt it, because you went from room to room rather than just seeing it. and really delving in. And we worked with costume ladies, which you can see us all costumed up in the period.
Where are you in this photo?
So I'm the very colorful one in the red, green,
standing
and
up.
yellow.
Yeah.
Yes, standing
Okay.
right actually next to Mike Wright with the big black hat on.
Yeah. And he's Reverend Hale?
Yes, and he's Reverend Hale. And I was cast as Tituba, which, as we all know, is a very ethnic part. She was a slave. And when I first got cast, I remember looking at Heidi and I'm like, there's an accent, there's a whole being to this character. And this being my second show that I've ever gotten cast to, I was so overwhelmed. And Heidi just had a belief in me that I never felt before. And she's like, I know you can do this role. And I listened to a lot of different soundtracks of different people who had done Tituba before, and she gave me one that I really connected with. And it was one of the first acting roles that I got so much praise for that people still to this day are like, you were just amazing. So I have to thank Heidi for that, because it was just a feeling of like, wow, I can really do this.
Great. Okay, let's see the next picture. Obviously you can. Okay, obviously you can do it. Okay.
This was a great one. This is Hallelujah Girls, which is my second to last performance that I've done, which was actually with Small Pond. So Small Pond is a community-based theater out of Marlborough, New Hampshire, which I got to meet because thanks to Grumpy Old Men. So they are an amazing group. They tend to ask people to the cast. They don't tend to hold auditions. But I had just done Grumpy Old Men with them, and Tracy Booth, who's one of the heads of Small Pond, was doing Hallelujah Girls. She was the director, and said, hey, how would you like to go and be the villain with me? And we be at each other, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that.
So who is your character? What's this character's name?
So my character's name is Bunny Sutherland. So once again, I'm back to doing an accent, which this was a Southern accent. And I am literally her nemesis. I am the main character's nemesis. I want to take her out, and I'm going to try every single thing to do it. And Tracy's like, I see you as a blonde, a sassy blonde. And I was like, okay, let's go. So who doesn't want to be a sassy blonde and act with some amazing people?
Sounds great. I want to do it too. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit, because in the next photo, where I see you in the front in the black dress, looking very glamorous and very happy, you are not part of the cast here. Mm-hmm. You played a different role. Tell us about this.
So this is actually the dining room. So Walpole Players at the time was going to put on Pygmalion. And for some reason it didn't work. I don't think we had the right cast or the timeline. But Walpole Players tends to do, or at the time did, like two main shows a year plus the Christmas Carol, and now they do a Radio Follies, which is coming up in March. And so we sat down in one of the heads, Ray Bowis's kitchen, and read the dining room. And they were like, but who's going to direct it? So one thing, in the right place at the right time, I sat down next to my friend Becky Pearson, and I said, well, I'll direct it, but I need help. And Becky's like, well, I'm your person. And so we together directed the dining room. But at the time, Walpole Players never did anything but comedies. Well, the dining room isn't necessary. It's like a dark comedy. There's that feeling of that you're laughing, and you shouldn't be laughing, because it goes over things like dementia and a father not understanding their daughter, or a father starting to get older. And so it goes over these things and tries to make them funny, but it really isn't. So it was really interesting to be the director of the show and to take that leap. But it was such an amazing experience, and I got to meet some great people like Peter Eisenberg, who's from a different theater group because he came out as well. So it's amazing how you get to meet people from all over.
Connections, yeah. We're going to shift gears again because you are also adept at engaging people in a wholly other context that I think we've alluded to. So maybe we can see the last picture. And this is you as a fitness coach. How did that happen?
So once again, right place, the right time. So when we moved here to New Hampshire, I, at the time, was working at a place called Applied Bolting, which makes washers that squirt. So when you drill a drill bit in, it squirts so that you know that the tension is correct. And I was working in a little office because I needed something besides just being an at-home mom. Not that at-home moms aren't amazing, but I just need a little bit more. And so I was working in this office, but I needed to go to a gym because even though I wasn't considered ADHD, I was considered hyperactive, and I definitely need something to do, so needed an outlet for my energy. So I met Lisa Dumont as my fitness instructor at Westminster Fit Body Boot Camp that at the time was at La Studio, which is now a truck stop. And I was taking a workout, and she went to go on vacation and had no subs. And I looked at her and said, well, I can do this. I can be your sub. And I right away went and got my certification to be a personal trainer. And I have to admit, I wasn't a great coach, but Lisa saw something in me. She said, you have a connection, you have a presence, which is from my acting background, but she knew she could develop me into a great coach and teach me the muscles, teach me what to look for. But it started with that presence and being comfortable in a crowd, comfortable with different types of people.
Tell us, you've already told me this wonderful story, but about some higher up in the boot camp hierarchy. And these boot camps, it's a national chain, is
Yes.
that right? Okay. So because you've been affiliated as a coach for a long time, you go to training sessions for coaches and
Yes.
meetings and so forth. So what was this? You tell the story that I think is so wonderful.
Yeah, it's so when I started, I've been a coach there for 13 years, which is amazing. I can't imagine that I've been there that long. But when I first started, we went to one of these conferences because it is a franchise, and they were talking about owners, go to your local colleges, go to your exercise science majors. Those are the people that you want to bring in because they know the muscles, and that's who you want to get to your coaches. And I remember at the time being really intimidated and looking at Lisa and being like, I got a marine biology background, but I don't have an exercise science background. And she said, nope, I still believe in you. Well, it was so funny because 3 years later, we went back to the same conference, and they're like, hire theater majors. They are the ones who can connect with your clients, and most of us are hungry for jobs, right? So we have our own little stages, and they said, and you can teach them the exercise science. And I remember looking at Lisa and saying, you were before your time, because here I am.
Sarah, I could talk to you all day. Fortunately, I don't have to because I will see you at Westminster Fit Body, where you are my coach and you are an inspiration, and your energy never ceases to amaze me, as does your ability to inspire. Seems everybody in the class. But I'm also determined to see you on stage, so you need to tell me the next time you're in a show.
I will definitely do that.
All
I
right.
can't wait to be in my next show. Actually, I am in a new show coming up called Duty Calls. It's on March 15th. It's actually to celebrate veterans, and it is at the Colonial Theater. And I don't have the exact times and dates, but it is at the Colonial, and it's called Duty Calls.
Okay. Remind me, get me details, and I will make every effort to be there.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for being with us today and for hearing Sarah Manning's wonderful story and learning a little more about her. And I hope you'll come back.
I would love to. Thanks so much for having me, Dorian.
A pleasure.